Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 93 of the Dads and Ed podcast from the frozen tundra of the Midwest. That's beautiful. I am pretty excited. I just read Foot of Snow this weekend.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I just saw that.
That can't be true.
It's way far out, of course. And it's from a meteorologist who needs people to watch his show, but we'll see. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have my snowboard yet, so I gotta get prepared. Welcome to the Dads and Ed program. My name is Josh Allen, Technology Integration Specialist for Lewis Central Schools, beautiful, chilly Council Bluffs, Iowa. 4 wonderful kids, beautiful wife. Pleased as always to be joined by.
I'm Devin Schoening, also and I'm not going to call it chilly. It's downright frigid the last few days. Council Bluffs, Iowa. My daughters, Grace and Claire, 14 and 12, and my wife, Erin. So yeah, I've actually got in the room where our computer is. I got the space heater going with the doors closed. It gets downright cold in here.
Jeez.
No good.
Yeah. I don't mind it. I like the change, like something different.
No.
All right.
I'd be better off living somewhere like, San Diego or something where it's the same boring 75 degrees and sunny every day.
Oh, yeah, I can't do that.
Maybe Ken will talk about that today. Maybe we'll have to talk about the weather because he's been to these parts.
He has. I think there was a comment about the weather when he was in Iowa here back in October. I think it was he read the wrong. He saw sunny. He didn't look at the actual temperature.
Right.
That'll get you every time.
It will. That little sun graphic doesn't always mean what you hope it means.
It doesn't mean in San Diego what it means in Iowa.
No, it doesn't.
All right. If you want to share your weather app stories with the show, feel free to tweet at us at Dads and Ed. Use the hashtag Dads and Ed anytime you want. Shout out to our friends over at Partial Credit. They've been adding us in there. Some of those crazy graphics. They're way more graphically designed than we are. I don't think that's a real term, but you know what I mean.
I do.
If you missed part of the show, check out the website, dadsanded.com, or hopefully you've already subscribed in iTunes or Google Play. Just do a search for Dads and Ed. We're the #1 rated show when you do that search. Make sure you do it all 3 letters, though. Don't or all 3 words. You can also check us out on the Education Podcast Network at edupodcastnetwork.com. So we were chatting a little bit before the show, and you were talking about a interesting discussion that you had pretty much around an actual water cooler.
Yeah.
So we were going to bring that in. So you want to set the stage for us?
Yeah, I was doing some reading for a class that I had that I'm taking right now, and it was in a book about school leadership or school evaluation, something like that. But anyways, the quote in the book was talking about the role of the principal in providing feedback to teachers and evaluating and supervising, and said, in addition, some school leaders have the fatal weakness of wanting to be liked. Big mistake. When Harry Truman was in the White House, he said, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. Good advice. And I posted this on Twitter a couple of weeks ago too, I think, and just kind of said, I don't know that I necessarily agree, especially with the tone of that, where saying that wanting to be liked is a fatal weakness of a leader. So I have some thoughts on that, but what do you think?
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree at it being a fatal weakness. I think you have to be more respected than liked, but you can't be like total jerk the whole time to be respected. You have to somehow be liked, I think, before you can be respected. Before you have to make tough decisions, I think you have to build a level of trust. Yeah. And while I'd agree with the scenario or the part about it's not I don't think it's necessary to be liked, but I think it's necessary to be, respected, I guess.
Yeah. And so some of the folks who I talked to both in the class and on Twitter, kind of started to blur this line. I think there's a really big distinction between being liked and being someone's friend. right? So I'm not saying that everybody, that a leader needs to necessarily be a friend to all of those people that they're leading. So in case principals with teachers, but being liked seems to bring on a whole bunch of other things that I think can make your job as leader easier, right? So I'm thinking about even the tough conversations you have with someone. If I'm a teacher, would I, you know, if somebody comes or gives me feedback, if I like that person, and that term has some weird connotation to it.
Yeah.
Like not like in the middle school definition of the word. And I like that person, I'm much more likely to accept that feedback in a way that's purposeful. If I don't like them, then I'm probably not even going to necessarily take their feedback as something that could be purposeful.
Yeah, I would say their feedback, if I don't like them, I think their feedback gets thrown out quicker.
Yeah, out the window, right?
I have said that my last couple years in the classroom, I did not like my teaching partner, and she, I would say that feeling was probably mutual, and we did not do a whole lot to mend those fences, and it really was too bad because we both had very different strengths, and we weren't willing to put those aside for the better good of the kids. Because we didn't like each other. So anytime there was something happen, we would be a little bit more critical. And I think you're right. If you like a person or respect a person, I think you're more willing to take that criticism or negativity than you would if you don't.
Right, and I think you're much more likely to. There are lots of things that go into liking someone too, right? I mean, it's not just I like them. It is typically because I trust them and respect them,
right?
And the liking part becomes a byproduct, right? Rachel Eikenberry on Twitter responded to the tweet that I put out and said, "Impactful leaders that value relationships are liked naturally, so it's a non-issue." And I thought that was really, really well said, right? So that idea that if you value relationships, it's a non-issue. You're going to be liked because people see you as valuing them as a human or as a teacher, or I'm sorry, as a just a professional. But the other side of that too is like I think we've talked before about my wife and Erin and I have talked about when we were looking at that quote together. I was asking her what she thought. You know, it's similar to like teachers saying that they don't need to be liked by their students, or you know, parents saying they don't need to be liked by their children. I'm not my son's friend, or I'm not my daughter's friend. And again, that line is really blurred. Like I really hope that my kids like me. And I think if they like me, that we're much more likely to have the kinds of conversations that are purposeful and impactful.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's a big difference between like and friendship. There's a lot of people at work that I like.
Yeah,
the vast majority of them, but we're not friends,
right?
And we don't need to be. I somewhat agree with Harry Truman. Like I don't go to work to make friends. I go to work to get things done and make life easier for teachers and better for kids. I want to be liked, but I don't need everybody to be my friend.
Right.
I'm not striving to be everybody else's.
Yeah. And I think that's true. But like, do you, with your children as a parent,
yeah,
do you care? Do you care if they like you?
I would say it probably depends on the situation. I'm not going to make a decision based off. I mean, I want them to, because that makes life easier.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to make a decision based off whether or not they will or won't.
Yeah. Do you think though, if your children like you, if you've built, and again, it goes back to what this, Rachel Aikenberry said on Twitter, if you've built a relationship with them, do you think it's more likely if they like you that if you have to make that decision that they don't necessarily agree with, that it's going to be easier for them to handle that because there is this, and again, I don't necessarily love the term like, it's just what was in the book, that they like you?
I think so, unless you're talking about my 2-year-old.
Right.
I mean, I think your daughters probably are better off, like closer to that point where that matters. I mean, that doesn't matter to younger kids.
No, I suppose that's true. Yeah, I suppose that's true. I don't know. It was just, it was interesting. It came up, like I said, in my reading, and kind of had it on Twitter, and then we had this conversation in the class that I'm into, and I just think it's interesting because there are really kind of two sides of that. People say, no, I don't need to like them. That's not my role as a principal, as a parent, as a teacher. It's not my role for people to like me. But I sure think that if they do, it makes your job a heck of a lot easier.
I love that quote in the Rita Pearson TED Talk when she mentions that. The teacher says, I come here to I can't even do it justice because it's too good. They need to sit in the chair, read the book, and learn.
Right.
I'm not here to like them.
Right. Rita Pearson, let's see, Melissa Taylor, who responded to my original tweet too, said, much like Rita Pearson said, kids don't learn from people they don't like.
Exactly.
I think adults are the same way. And I do think that's true to a degree. Like again, I don't want to be on the side here. I'm not saying that if I was a principal, my goal would be just for everybody to like me.
Right.
Because that's not the case.
No.
You are trying to get things accomplished. You are trying to get people to change, the way they think sometimes. Like that's not easy. But I do think if you invest in relationships and people like you, that work becomes much, much easier.
Taylor Siebert checking in, former guest. I'm sure everyone at Strive TV loves him. He's just an all-around swell guy.
Exactly. That's why Taylor is who he is. Everybody loves him.
He's successful.
That's right.
That's how you do it. Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to have Eric and Sarah and Ben all on the show. I don't know that they'll come on and admit, but all right. Hold on. Taylor just responded back. Yeah, he's laughing. That's what we thought. Anyway, moving on to Dad Moment of the Week, and then we'll have Ken Shelton on here. I actually got to get back on the basketball court tonight. I know that your season is starting. I have not coached this year just because I am still teaching night classes up until next Monday or the Monday after. And so I just kind of didn't agree to it, and been doing some stuff at church on Wednesday nights, and my son's coach couldn't make it tonight. So I got to step in and coach again. And my wife, said, you ready to get back into it? I said, nope, that was good. I'm done. I did my one night. So anyway, it was fun for one evening to get back on the court a little bit with the guys and have some fun. So it was a good time.
I, recovering from the stupid knee, I finally, so before I get to my real quick dad moment of the week, finally got on the treadmill and did some really slow jogging the other day, which led me to believe, I think, at basketball practice the other day that I could jump in and try and do a couple of things. And, the first couple steps I tried to take, I'm hobbling along, and the girls are just laughing at me and just saying, Coach, don't. You're going to hurt yourself again. I don't want you to do that. And so there was, it's great to be getting closer to being able to move like a kind of normal human being again.
Gazelle.
But I never have moved like a gazelle. A lumbering, what's an animal that kind of lumbers around? That's kind of me, I suppose. But it was good. But my dad moment of the week kind of goes along with that with basketball too. Basketball has started for us. We're almost 3 weeks in now. We've got a game on Friday. And last week we had one of our favorite kind of things to do. We had our team Thanksgiving. We have my varsity team out every year, and we make the turkey, and the girls make everything else when they come out. And one of the things that we always do, and I have my girls, my daughters were here doing this too, and we kind of do something where we tell each other why we're grateful for them, for each other. So this year we drew names out of a basket of everybody that was there, and you had to, tell that person why you were grateful for them or why you appreciate them. And it's just great to hear them kind of talk about each other sometimes in a way that they don't. I try and do that almost at the end of every practice, call on a few kids and have them say something positive about a teammate from the day. But we then open it up at the end, and then we got girls kind of talking about other teammates and other coaches that they didn't necessarily didn't draw their name for. And it's just kind of one of my favorite things every year. And I'm glad that my daughters are kind of able to be part of that, because we have a great group of girls, basketball girls. And I'm really, I'm always really happy to have my daughters around them. So,
yeah. That's fabulous. That is a wonderful tradition that you guys have to kind of build team. So
it is, and it's just always been such a good couple hours together,
yeah.
where we don't always have that time to just kind of be together and hang out and talk and they get to do the dishes. What I find interesting every year is that we've always got girls who have never done dishes before. High school girls. I don't care if they're girls or boys. High school
Right.
kids who haven't done dishes.
That is
And
crazy.
they do it as a coach's house, which makes me really happy.
Play harder, or I'll have you back to do more dishes.
That's right. You'll come back, and we'll also clean up the garage. And
is that like are you like the 21st century Mr. Miyagi?
yes. Instead of paint the fence and wax the car, and we do scrub the pot, and it's a lot of fun.
That is fabulous. Bill's checking in. Bill, you we'll allow your tardiness. That's okay. Not a problem.
I don't know. Should we? I mean, if we were tardy, he wouldn't allow it from us.
Oh God, here we go. I feel like this as a graduate and undergraduate adjunct professor, this is something I deal with all the time. Like, would you be okay if we showed up late?
I just don't feel. I feel like Bill would give us a hard time, especially me, if we showed up late.
I am not hosting. Good call, Bill. Good point. That is well taken. That's probably the excuse that some of my students would like to give me. Well, I'm not the one in charge. Well, you will be someday, if maybe. Not if this keeps up.
Well, if Bill is ever a guest host and he is late by a millisecond, I am going to be all over it.
That is funny. Ken is having an issue getting in.
He is currently on and off, and that's okay.
I am not just randomly texting people during the show. He sees us. Technology's hard. Notice that it was working fine until Bill showed up.
That is true. If he would have been on time,
yeah,
we would have had this on lockdown. But
yeah, oh well. Jim's in the house too. Jim York, good to hear from you. Good to see you. Let me send this again. So, how was Thanksgiving other than the girls?
It was great. It was busy. I think it's just. Do you guys travel? Do you go out of town, or are you here?
Not anymore. We used to travel up until last year. It had been 20 years since I had not driven more than an hour for Thanksgiving, and now that my in-laws moved back, well, we don't have to, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's kind of nice too. We typically don't either. We're here, and we ended up with as much as I love. I'll have to ask Ken. I know Ken's big food. I have to ask him what Thanksgiving food is his go-to. But we ended up having, since we had the team Thanksgiving, we had Thanksgiving Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Nice.
A lot of Thanksgiving.
That's good. I like that.
Even as much as one might love turkey and mashed potatoes and stuffing and all that good stuff, that's a whole heck of a lot of Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Hey, let's move on to sharing is caring while we're waiting for Bill. I got mine. I'm ready.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's that one segment of the show that you usually have about 30 more minutes to work on.
I usually plan on it, so you throw me for a loop. That's okay.
All right. Well, hey, so as you all know, we are in the holiday season, and one of the things that my kids absolutely love is a game called Mustache Smash. I don't know if you have seen this before. Basically, you flip over. Everybody gets their own mustache with a little suction cup on it,
mm-hmm.
and then you slam down. If it flips over, then and it's your mustache or your color. You slam down your mustache and you get it. My 2-year-old is going nuts over this right now. It is hilarious. In fact, tonight as I'm setting up for the show, she's yelling off the stairs, "Daddy, come play Mustache Smash with me." She was the most heartbroken when I told her no. So I will put a link on it out on the Dads in Ed hashtag. If you have young kids, it is a fantastic game to play or to get. So
Nice.
yeah, gift giving here on the Dads in Ed program.
Yeah, we haven't played that one before. We spent this weekend. So one of the things when I was young, my family, you ever played the card game Canasta?
No, we have not. We're not a big card game.
So when I was young, my parents and grandparents played it all the time, and it was kind of a big deal. And so one of the cool things actually that happened is my mom, when they came over for Thanksgiving, she had found this box of just old pictures and stuff in her house and kind of brought it. And one of the things in there were a set of handwritten rules for Canasta that my grandma created. And she was a stickler for the rules and took this game seriously. And the funny thing is, it's like 3 pages of notes and rules. And there are things that are highlighted in red and in all capital letters. And it was actually really, really cool to kind of see her, her handwriting and all that was something that's that's actually kind of funny when you will look back and read it.
Yeah, getting super serious about the Canasta, huh?
She was super serious about it. There's no doubt about it. My sharing and caring is going to be a book I just read. I just finished last week or so a book by Ta-Nehisi Coates that's called "We Were 8 Years in Power," and it really is about kind of the Obama presidency through the eyes of Coates, who's a writer for The Atlantic, and is an African-American man, wrote another great book called Between the World and Me, which is kind of a letter to his son, which was really about being kind of Black in America. And the book was really just fascinating. So it kind of gives some notes, what he called notes from each year. And it also has an article that he published in each year in the book. And they deal with really some interesting topics. So it talks about incarceration in the United States, and how many people are incarcerated, especially how it impacts the African American community. And there's a great story about Michelle Obama and a great article about President Obama at the end of his presidency. And it's just a really interesting look and a different perspective. It's kind of been my goal and things that I've been reading lately is to try and get a different perspective on lots and lots of topics that we kind of deal with on a daily basis. And sometimes we kind of turn a blind eye to because we feel like they don't affect us. And so that's kind of a current read that I have that again, looking for things that kind of challenge my one perspective that I might have on topics.
Yeah, I saw something the other day just about having to. Oh, look at this!
I don't understand why it's doing that.
Technology's tough, man. You know what? We are pretty much the worst about technology issues. That's just the way we roll. We don't like to make things easy, man.
No, that's weird. It wouldn't join from my laptop, but it did from the iPad.
Mm-hmm. +1 for iOS, man.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
It used to be so.
I'm sorry this isn't like capturing everything, but
Oh, you're good. Trust me, it's been worse. Hotel Wi-Fi is terrible, by the way. In case you're ever wondering.
Yes, it is.
I was wondering. So you sent me a picture. It used to be that you had to be like friends in a Google Plus circle to like join a hangout. So actually that was going to be my next step with the picture you sent. I mean, I thought we were done with that like 3 years ago, but I don't know.
Considering Google Plus is done.
Exactly. Ironically, please sign up for this end of life website.
Yes. Yeah. Product that will no longer exist.
Exactly. All right, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to class up the program a little bit. We have educator, speaker, soccer dad, Ken Shelton is in the house. Ken's appearance tonight, sponsored by the UCLA Booster Club. It's not too soon to get your 2019 UCLA football season tickets. Sign up now at KenSheltonPlayedForUs.com. I have to tell you, the only reason I included that, like, they didn't, in case you're wondering, they don't really sponsor the show. In case you're confused by that, I actually didn't know you played football until you were here in Iowa in October.
Oh, you didn't know? Yeah, it was a little while ago. So
I Googled it. It's still on the Google.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Well, back then you didn't have Google. But yeah, because the thing is if I bring that up, I mean, I bring it up in some of my talks, just as far as like lessons that I learned in college, is, you know, that work for me now that weren't part of what I learned in class, like discipline and time management. But if I bring it up and people Google it, then it makes it easy for them to identify the years. Then it makes it easy for them to identify my actual age.
Well, I don't remember. I don't know that I did the math. I just Googled because I hadn't realized that.
Yeah.
Are you excited about Chip Kelly?
You know, yes and no. I know, you know, there's a couple of things. One, the team did okay this year. I know they had a tough schedule. They got a lot of underclassmen, a lot of starting freshmen. But knowing how college sports is nowadays, I never really invest too much in the new coach because, I mean, anyone who follows college football, with the exception of a few big-time programs across the country, if a coach gets really, really, really popular, they usually leave.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I think that he's done a few things that are in the right direction for shifting the culture to be his program, but you know, we'll see, man. It's not just going and playing football. Now, I went to school there too and graduated. So, you know, I mean, I will say one of the things I am definitely proud of is the fact that my last 3 years there, I was on the athletic honor roll as well. So, you know, it's not you go to school, then you play football. It's usually the other way around. And there, remember, you're competing at a major university, which I'm sure is the case at other big universities. You know, even there in Iowa, University of Iowa is a big school. You got athletes that are in the classrooms with people that don't have those obligations or those commitments.
Yeah.
And, you know, and in some cases, maybe they are better than them in the classroom, but you still have to, you know, get it done. So.
Right. And not to get too far down that road of, you know, Ken's college days, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into some other conversation? A little bit about your background, who you are, what you've been doing, you know, not only professionally, but kind of a little bit about you personally.
Yeah. So I worked in, you know, my educational background is basically I worked in the Los Angeles Unified School District for roughly 18 years, 14 of which I was a full-time classroom teacher. And now I work with EdTech team, and I get to travel literally around the world and give talks on, nowadays for sure, talks on topics I'm very passionate about, I feel very strongly about. And in many cases, those talks involve elements of my own personal experiences in high school and even in college, and even furthermore in grad school. And, you know, so that's what I do now as far as my personal life goes. I mean, I haven't been able to do it as much as I used to, which I'll get back to it. I'm big time into photography and visual storytelling. So, you know, I'll be getting back to doing more of that over the course of the next month. And then next year, I'm going to make a concerted effort to do some creative exercises with my camera, video stuff, and still photography. And actually, I've got to update the firmware on my drone. I'm going to get back to flying my drone as well.
Nice.
And, you know, and beyond that, I mean, I'm looking at the possibility of getting, you know, another advanced degree if I can. I mean, the hard part is the time. But at this point, I see, as far as my pathway goes, I see that as being a realistic goal to set for myself over the next couple of years.
You talked a little bit about the ability now to give talks about things that you're really, really passionate about. And when you were in Iowa recently, the keynote that you delivered at iTech really had to do with equity, especially as we're thinking about it in schools and with or without technology. Tell me a little bit about how that came about and how that maybe talk has changed for you? I mean, when we were looking at, I'm on the iTech board, and when we were looking at, you know, what we would hope that you would come and speak about, that was the one that jumped out at us from the list of things. You're like, hey, here are things I really am interested in, passionate about. That was the one that jumped out for us. Tell me a little bit about that talk in particular and why it's become such a one that you really like to go back to.
Yeah, so it really boils down to my observations, experiences, and quite frankly, conversations that I've had with educators over the last, honestly, I would say over the last probably about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when I've had these conversations, a lot of it really triggered, you know, a lot of memories from myself when I was in school, as well as at the schools that I worked at when I worked in the LA Unified.
Mm-hmm.
And I just noticed that, one, as I have in that talk, education, from my perspective, education is not broken.
Yeah.
Education is doing exactly what it's intended to do. It stratifies society. It gives the haves more and the have-nots less.
Mm-hmm.
It does not allow for the capitalization of human capital to its maximum potential. And many of our status quo systems that exist now existed even back when I was in school. And so I just felt that, as much as I'm an advocate for technology, as much as I'm an advocate for, all of the things that we could say are meaningful to us when it comes to educational technology, I still kept going back to the fact that no pedagogy, no application, no platform, no device, no tool matters if you don't have an equitable learning environment.
Yeah.
And so that's why I developed that talk, and that's why it's been requested quite a bit lately as well, because my whole thing is that now with technology, you do have the ability to provide equitable access to learning that's far, far more detailed, in depth, and efficient than when I was in school.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties in where, I share this statement all the time where I'm like, every student has a voice, but is every voice heard?
Yeah.
Back when I was in school, it was much more difficult to do that. Now, with the right platform and the right, tools, if you will, you can ensure that every voice is heard. And in many cases, that makes a difference between having a really diverse and wide depth of learning versus it being one person, one stream, and one mechanism, and that's it. So that's why that was the talk that I was really happy that you all had selected that, because it does provoke a lot of thought in some.
Yeah.
I will say, that for this recording as well, and it's something that I shared with Jeff. I got a lot of really interesting feedback, and it was all in a positive way from folks that were in attendance. And I'll say the most gratifying comments I got that were aligned with this were teachers that were basically saying, I hadn't really thought about some of the stuff that you've shared, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to be, in fact, several teachers were like, I'm going to be better, which means I'm going to ensure that I do better.
Right.
And that really is ultimately the goal, because I know, I'll say this, a lot of times in education, what really, really is missing are the meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
And there are various reasons why people don't want to have certain conversations. I've now encouraged schools, like when they're looking at school culture, I'm like, don't shy away from conversation with students about race, class, and gender.
Yeah.
Don't shy away from those. We need to be having those conversations. And the interesting thing is, a lot of times when I hear the adults say, well, I'm not sure that the kids are ready for those, I usually respond and say, before you make that assumption, you should probably look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you ready for that conversation?
Right.
Because I just think that that's one of the things that we should be talking about. That is the reasons why, like for me going and spending time with educators in Iowa, I was in Georgia, I was in New York. I mean, I've been to all kinds of places where, it really has made me a better educator, because I have a better understanding of the challenges that educators have, whether they teach in a rural area, a suburban area, an urban area, whether they only have one demographic of student or they have a class of 35 with 30 different languages spoken.
Yeah.
I think in the end, part of me being able to share a lot of those stories, as well as identify a way that those fit into an equitable lens is because I've been able to have those conversations.
Right. And I think not to monopolize the conversation here around this one topic, but, we talked a little bit after one of your sessions about, I always kind of want to challenge my own perspectives. And we talked about the book White Fragility a little bit. I was talking to Josh a little bit at the beginning of this about, I just got done reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' We Were 8 Years in Power. And one thing that I remember from that talk, from the keynote in Iowa, is I was sitting next to Lance Lennon, and you made the comment about, I can't remember if you said 0 or 1, but only having 0 or 1 teacher in your education history up through your master's degree that was a person of color. And I turned to Lance and I said, "That's crazy. That can't be, that's a crazy stat." And he looked at me and said, "How many have you had?" And I said, "You're right." Like, I mean, it's the perspective, I think, is so much, until you open yourself up to understanding or listening to that conversation or that perspective, you really have no idea. I mean, I looked at him literally and said, "Man, that seems like it's crazy." And he said, "How about you?" I said, "You're right." I couldn't think of more than one. And the one teacher I could think of taught African-American studies at university, which, was just kind of an interesting, I love that talk opens up perspective to people who might not have it naturally.
Right. And the thing is, think about the value of learning from, and I don't want to say fill in a blank, but like, a laundry list of different backgrounds, different perspectives, different life experiences. I mean, it just provides for a much more fruitful learning experience, period, regardless of the content. I mean, like I'll share with you, like I'll share a quick story with you too. So back at my last school before I left, I remember having conversation with students around several things. So one of my favorite things to talk to students about was culture in general. And we would talk about things like music and food and art. And I would share with them things like all the different types of food that I either cook or that I've had, and all the different music. And I play music in class. And, like, well, where'd you learn all this stuff? And I'm like, but honestly, I just had an open mind to the experience. And if I like it, I like it. And if I don't, I move on and try something new. And I'm like, there's value in doing that. And I remember telling the students back then, I remember seeing this quote. I don't remember where I saw it, but I remember seeing this quote. And it kind of ties in with what I was able to share with there. The quote is basically, travel is the only thing where you'll spend money and you get richer because of it. And I shared with them how my travels have really broadened my perspective on a lot of things, whether it's learning another language or learning how to, navigate a whole new city of which I've never been to, or things like that. And it's just, it's the classic step outside of your comfort zone, but it really is. I won't say I looked at it as I'm seeking experiences that make me uncomfortable. It's I'm seeking new experiences, and I have to learn and adapt in those.
Right.
Speaking of interesting experiences, we had Jesse Levinsky on a month or so ago, and we were told to ask you about Sicilian pistachios.
Yeah, there they go with that.
Do you care to elaborate or throw the co-host of Partial Credit podcast under the bus?
Which is okay too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not just Jesse; it's Jesse and Jeff. I don't know if he told the story, but basically the short version of the story is we were in Chicago about a year and a half ago, and we walked into one of the donut shops, and we were there in March, and of course it's freezing cold and snowing in Chicago, and and by the way, that was the first time I actually had a really fun competitive snowball fight with both with Jeff and Dean, which those are my buddies up in Montana. And at any rate, we go into this donut shop, and so they got the donuts because they were preparing for St. Patrick's Day. And so these donuts have this green frosting on them. And I asked the person behind the counter, I'm like, I'm just curious to know if you use Sicilian pistachios to make the frosting that goes on the donuts. And, I'm going through this whole explanation of how, like, gelato, if you go to a authentic gelato place in the US and they serve pistachio flavored gelato, a lot of times it's made from Sicilian pistachio paste because those taste different than the pistachios that you grow here in California. So anyway, I explain all this, ask this question, and then of course Jeff turns to the person behind the counter. He's like, "Let me ask you a question. Do you even care about Sicilian pistachios at all?" And of course, she kind of looked at him and looked at me and looked back at him. And she's like, "No, I don't." so, so that's the joke. So that's why it's an ongoing banter between us as far as like, you know, they just mentioned Sicilian pistachio. I'm like, all right, I'll never live that down, but it's okay. I'm sure at my funeral, when it comes time for them to speak, the only thing they'll say is, "I'm sure Ken is enjoying Sicilian pistachio now."
And then just walk off.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Exactly.
Everybody will go, who's that guy? Who is that?
Sicilian pistachio guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what? The next time if you chat with either of the two of them, ask him how do you pronounce what you order in restaurants where you get a piece of bread with chopped tomatoes put on top of it.
Okay. I think I heard this one too.
You might have.
Well, I'm not going to mess it up.
Well, Ken, one of our... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I told the two of them one of these days, if we're ever in Italy, I'm going to let them go ahead and figure out how to pronounce stuff and watch them get laughed out of the store. Meanwhile, I'll be able to communicate with no problem.
That is true. Yes.
Well, you know, one of the main reasons we have this podcast is to talk a little bit about, you know, the parenting and education. And one question that resonates with all the guests that we have and fits really well in is, how has being a parent yourself impacted your role in education, and vice versa? How does being an educator affect you as a parent?
You know, it's interesting. I had the opportunity to give a talk in Albemarle County, which is a county where Charlottesville, Virginia is, earlier in the month, so beginning of November. And it was for the community and specifically for parents. And the title of the talk was Parenting in the Digital Age. And, you know, the questions you're asking are very good questions for us to always be cognizant of. And for me, it's several things. One is, you know, ensuring that my daughters are able to use technology effectively for representation of their voice as well as access to information. But I will say it's been quite frustrating with some of the things that I've seen where, for example, my 12-year-old, her school is one-to-one with iPads. And yet the only way that she's using the iPad right now is they post assignments that she has to put in Notability. And then she has to do the assignments, download it as a PDF, and then email that to the teacher. They're not using, there's no creation at all, right. None at all. And it's simultaneously frustrating and annoying because I know of lots and lots of schools that I've been to where they don't have one-to-one access.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they're like, oh, if we only had this, we could do all these different things. And you hear all these wonderful ideas that teachers have. So, you know, there's the simultaneous part of me that's like, you know, I do think that the kids should be able to use technology in their learning experiences quite, you know, prevalently. But I also understand the importance of being able to monitor and manage screen time, as well as, you know, do things that are analog, because, you know, as much as we prefer and like to use technology, there's still a significant component of our lives that requires analog. You know, conversations face to face are still my favorite, not via email or things like that. But, you know, I guess for me, the main thing is I'm still seeing a very, very reticent or slow shift in how different devices, whether it's Chromebooks, laptops, or in the case like example last year, iPads, how they're truly being used. Because I think that all goes back to how are the teachers being prepared in their credential programs or their master's programs before they go into the classroom. And that's where, if you're going to see any major shift in education that we would all say, okay, that's where we should be going, I think it's going to have to occur in the higher ed area, because they're the ones that are providing they're the ones where the next generation of teachers are taking classes to get their certifications. And if they're not getting exposed to it in that capacity with a meaningful pedagogical connection to it, they're not going to use it in the classroom.
Right.
Fabulous answer. That's a nice mic drop. We can walk off on that one. Ken, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for working through the technical issues, and looking forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, I hope so. I want to come back to Iowa. I feel like the opportunity I had there was, look, I'll conclude. I do want to share with the two of you something that's like really meaningful to me on a personal level. And that is that I've had the opportunity to speak at a lot of ISTE affiliates, and I'm not naive to recognize that many ISTE affiliates do not have speakers that look like me. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find one that looks like me that's had an opportunity. And I am more than appreciative of the opportunities that I am provided to do that, especially, as we talked about earlier, especially because it gives me an opportunity to interact with, to talk to learn from, to learn with educators that I otherwise would never have access to. So, I appreciate the two of you having me on here. Obviously, Josh, you and I go back quite a ways, even back to NITA. And, I do want your listeners to hear me say that, while I may be kind of like a lone wolf, for lack of a better term, as far as the speaking goes, I do recognize the value and the importance of my opportunities that I have and the contributions that I'm able to make, and more importantly, the connections I hope I'm able to make with those opportunities. So I really appreciate the two of you having me on here, and more importantly, it was more than a pleasure to be able to spend some time with you in Des Moines. I wish we had more, but we know that it was never enough.
Right?
No, never is. You just have to move here and enjoy the cold weather with us.
It was 78 degrees today.
Hey, we were joking about your comment when you came to Iowa that you noticed the sunshine on the weather app, but you didn't scroll down to see what the temperature was.
Exactly.
Means something different everywhere.
I had a warm greeting while I was there, so that's
hey, sometimes that's all we got, man.
I'll take it. Good.
All right. Well, Ken, thanks again, and we will see everybody else in 2 weeks.
Perfect.